Hi everybody, Shakti here, or Dr. Rose. You can call me either one, I answer to both. I'm starting a new video series on archetypes. Archetypes is one of my favorite subjects. I love to work with archetypes, communicate with them, invoke and evoke archetypes. Archetypes, what are archetypes? So when I say that term, what does that mean? So typically what it means is that you're talking about a divine being that usually does not exist in our 3D realm necessarily, right? So for example, in different traditions, they're known throughout the world, such as gods and goddesses, demi-gods, ascended masters, angels. Yeah, they just go by spirit guides, animal totems. Those are also archetypes. And I love this topic because of what they can do in people's lives. So I thought to do this video series for you to talk about, and in this series, I'm going to talk about what are archetypes? Like really, what are they? What kinds of archetypes are there out there? Why do you want them in your life? Like what can they do for you? How do you choose an archetype, or do they choose you? How do you communicate with them? What kinds of relationships can you have with them? And then also I'll provide some personal testimonies of me working with archetypes, or archetypes just being in my life. Archetypes are very transformational, and they're real. As you know, I study a lot of Dr. Bhaskaran Pillai of the Pillai Centers. I study a lot of his teachings, and many of the techniques and meditations that he gives are really working directly with archetypes. I just have to say, even before Dr. Pillai, I worked with different kinds of archetypes from different traditions. And let me go first to looking at the definition and where this term comes from. So the term archetype goes back as far as ancient Greece. And typically, I would say Plato in particular, if you want to look it up, ideally, or just typically, what Plato refers to as an archetype is that everything in our physical world has a spiritual form. It comes from some kind of a spiritual or perfect origin, in the other realm, right? That's one way of looking at archetypes. Another is what Carl Jung says, and I have to read this because I can't remember this offhand. But Carl Jung would see an archetype as universal, archaic patterns and images that derive from the collective unconscious and are the psychic counterpart of instinct. That's a lot of words, and I'm gonna help for you to understand that. But also another way to look at it is that they are models of people, behaviors, or personalities. Archetypes are really inborn within us. They're here, they exist within us. They're inborn tendencies that play a role in influencing human behavior. That sounds like a lot, right? So basically what we're talking about is, I can give you a good example. When you think about mythological stories, one of the things that, remember mythological stories, myths and legends, they're passed down from generation to generation. Some of them go back as thousands of years, hundreds of years, or at least maybe a couple of decades or so. And the reason why people tell these stories, not only to help people to remember the different gods and goddesses and archetypes and whatnot that are out there, but also to kind of awaken that archetype within them. There's a reason why we tell those stories. Sometimes what you're going through in life, it's very similar to what an archetype, a god or goddess, has experienced. And a lot of times there will be some kind of message or some kind of, hey, this is something that you can do to help yourself in a situation. Now, it's not always about, solving an issue, but mythological stories typically contain with them. They're not always literal, first of all. The second of all, they tend to contain knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and even spiritual science to help us learn what we can do to overcome a situation, to improve lives as human beings. Because as human beings and living on the earth plane, we have lots of issues, right? So here are some types of archetypes. So for example, you have a great mother, a goddess, or a great father. A lot of people in Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, think of God as the father, the protector, the provider, that kind of thing. There are also archetypes of who are like warriors, okay? What do we think of warriors? We think of someone who's disciplined, who's focused, who's skilled. You know, those kinds of qualities people will attribute to a warrior all over this planet. It doesn't matter what the archetype is or how it's portrayed in a particular society, but it's how we understand a warrior to be. You know, we have these common attributes that we will often apply to a warrior archetype. Another is a caregiver, someone who sees the pain in this world and wants to make things better for humanity, for human beings. It could be a creator, you know, someone who is creative, who creates, an archetype that creates, or a magician, someone who uses various spiritual tools to create change. So there are all kinds of archetypes, and that's basically what archetypes are, you know. They are a perfected being of some sort that lives on the other side, that lives beyond our awareness, our consciousness. They have qualities and attributes that tend to be common to most human beings. Like a warrior, you know, the way we perceive them will be common, or a creator or whatnot. This is part of what's called the collective unconscious. And so what I'll do in the next video, I'm going to talk about, you know, how do they exist? Like, where do they come from? Where do they live? You know, who are these things? So I'll tell you a little bit more at that time. Oh, before I go, I wanted to say, be sure to subscribe. I put out a video once a week mostly. And make sure that you hit the bell button too, so that you get a notification of when I put out my video. So namaste, folks. Have a blessed day.